Hello, friends. It's Father Andrew once again. And today I want to talk about the question of what is faith? This is a word that gets used a lot in religious conversation, especially in Christianity. And it gets used so often, you'd think everybody knows exactly what this is, right? Everybody knows what faith is. And that's why we just use the word literally without defining it. But I think that there's actually a lot of confusion that has come about this word. You can hear, for instance, Christians use it and atheists use it sometimes to mean exactly the same thing. So sometimes they'll say stuff like, well, faith is believing something that you don't have any evidence for, right? And of course, for an atheist who's criticizing Christianity, that's one of the things he'll say. It's like, well, you just believe in stuff you have no evidence for. So you must be stupid, because why would you believe in something that you don't have any evidence for? And it's a good question. Christians often use it exactly in the same way. Sometimes they'll add a little bit to it. They'll add the idea of hope. So, for instance, they'll say, well, you've just got to have faith. Even though I don't know how that's going to turn out, or I have no reason to believe it's going to turn out well, you just got to have faith that everything is going to be okay, even though you don't have any evidence that it will be, right? You can find a lot more sort of subtle uses of this term, based especially on scripture, like the idea that faith is believing in something that you don't have any evidence for. That's not what the scripture talks about at all, actually. It never says that. It never says, believe in something that there is zero evidence for. So I don't know why people think that that's the definition of faith. But there are various uses in scripture of this word faith. In Greek, the word is pistis. The verb is pistevo, meaning I, and then whatever that is, faith, or I believe. It can be translated as I believe. And one of the ways that this gets used a lot is that faith is about trust, right? So I have faith that things will turn out okay. So that means I trust that things will turn out okay, or I hope that things will turn out okay. You can also see faith used to mean simply I believe something. I believe something to be true. So, for instance, in the scripture when it says that the demons believe and tremble, right? So they believe what is true. This is probably the most common way that faith gets used in, at least in American Christianity, is that faith is about believing something to be true, setting aside this question of whether you have any evidence for it or not. I think all Christians would say that they have evidence for what they believe in. Now, it may not be empirical evidence. It may not be the kind of evidence that would convince somebody else, but certainly they would not say they have zero evidence. But it's very common to talk about faith in this way, that faith is believing in something, right? It's believing that something is true. And so that's why people will say things like, I have faith that that is true. Or they'll say, I put my faith in the Bible, meaning I believe that it's true. Okay? So there's a problem with that idea. And it kind of works itself out a lot in the years that follow the Reformation and the religious groups that come out of the Reformation, and particularly those that believe in a doctrine called sola fide, which means by faith alone, right? And so the idea of by faith alone is that we're saved by grace through faith, right? And very famously, when Martin Luther was making his German translation of the Bible, he actually adds in the word alone, even though it's not there. It doesn't say by faith alone. We're saved by grace through faith, right? And so if you think that faith is simply agreeing that something is true, then you have the idea, well, I believe that Jesus is who he says he is, that he did what the scripture says that he did. I believe that I'm going to be saved by him. Therefore, I have faith. The problem with that is that, as it says also, the demons have this faith. They believe these things to be true. They know better than most of us, actually. And they know what's true. They know who Jesus is. They know what he did. They know all those things. They believe that it's true. They agree that it is true. So what's the difference between a demon who agrees with what is true and a Christian who agrees with what is true? Is there any difference? Why aren't the demons saved? Why aren't they, in heaven with all the saints? So this is the problem with the idea that faith is simply agreeing that something is true. And the way that the word faith is used in the scriptures, including the New Testament, especially the New Testament, it doesn't always fit if you understand it simply to mean I agree that this is true. Like, for instance, there's mentions there where it talks about faith increasing. What does that mean? Like, I believe harder. I agree even more that this is true. That doesn't make any sense. This gets us back to this Reformation problem of faith and works. Now, I'm not going to try to solve all that in this short video. There's a lot of things you can read about that from an Orthodox point of view, but I want to extend this out and think about this word faith now, not from this kind of rarefied, reduced, precise theological sense that usually people are trying to get hold of it with. And the good thing is in English, the word faith actually can do a lot of this work for us in terms of understanding exactly what this means. And it turns out, actually, that the English word faith, in its multiple uses, works very well in terms of understanding the biblical model of what faith is. So it is true that we use the word faith in English to mean I agree that something is true. We can also use it to mean I hope that something is true or that something will turn out in a certain way. But we also have this wonderful phrase, keeping faith. Keeping faith. And then the opposite of that, of course, is breaking faith, right? So what does that mean? What does it mean to keep faith with someone? To break faith with someone? Well, that's about loyalty. That is about whether you're going to stick with somebody or not, whether you're going to stay in their corner or not, whether you're going to stay in relationship with them or not, right? And we use this a lot. A really great example, of course, is in marriage. If someone engages in adultery, we say that they have been unfaithful. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't believe something or didn't agree with something. It means they did not keep faith. It means they broke faith with their spouse. They were unfaithful. And this gets us closer to what this really means if you look at the way it works out in Scripture, right? So, for instance, think of the man that comes to Jesus and he wants that healing for his child, and Jesus says, "Do you believe that I can do this?" Which sounds like he's saying, "Do you think that this is true?" Which maybe that is what he means. But then the man says, "I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. I believe, help my unbelief." Now, this verb that's used for "I believe" is pistevo. So again, this is the same root from pistis, meaning faith. So, right? So you could also translate it as "I faith, help my unfaithing," right? Which is awkward in English. But it doesn't make any sense if it's about simply agreeing with something or believing that something is true, right? Because how can you both agree that Jesus can do this and also disagree that he can do this? It doesn't make any sense. But if you understand it in terms of keeping faith, if you understand it in terms of keeping faith versus breaking faith, and you know that within a marriage, again, to be faithful implies something more than just not sleeping around, you begin to see why a man might say, "I believe, help my unbelief," or, "I am faithing, help my unfaithing." He's talking about faithfulness. Faithfulness. So he's saying, "Lord, I am faithful to this. I'm gonna come along with you on this. I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna cooperate with you, but I'm not all in. My heart isn't completely in it." Okay? So you can be faithful and unfaithful at the same time. And it's not just a matter, like in a marriage, it's not just a matter of whether you sleep around or not. Okay? So being truly faithful to your spouse means a lot more than just not getting into bed with someone who's not your spouse. It means attentiveness to them. It means loyalty to them. It means always checking in with them. It means that your life always refers to them, that there's a sense of we and not just I and you, right? So to be faithful has a lot more going on. It's a whole way of life, really, especially when you're talking about a close relationship. And so then this gets us to what it means to be faithful in the scriptures. And it also helps us to understand what it means when St. Paul says, "By grace you saved through faith." And then he says, "And that not of yourselves is a gift of God." Now, the people who believe in Calvinistic predestination, right, the idea that God determines everything beforehand with various levels of what everything means, when they read that, they will see that it says it is a gift of God. God makes some people have faith, and other people he does not make them have faith. And so that's why some people are saved and some people are not. What does it mean that faith is a gift of God? It means that God has given us the way of faithfulness. He has given us the way that we can be faithful, right? Because we didn't figure it out for ourselves. No human being sat down and said, okay, this is how you be faithful to God. Now I can do it. And God will accept that. I've decided that that's what that means. No, 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 no. God said, this is how you do it. He gave commandments. He gave a way of worship. He gave the life of faithfulness to us. And it's up to us then to follow it. So it is a gift of God, right? It's a gift of God. It would be like if I gave one of my children a car, okay? And, they got a license and I taught them how to drive and all that stuff. It is a gift of me to them. But driving is up to them. If they receive the gift and never do anything with it, it doesn't do any good for them. Not at all, right? The car is a gift. But getting someplace with it is up to them. They have to drive. They have to actually put the key in the car and put the foot to the pedal and drive. And then they can get to where they need to go. Christianity is basically the same. It is a gift of God. It's given to us by God. It's not something that was invented by any human being. This life of faithfulness is something given by God. God gave us the commandments. He gave us all of these things. And he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. This is very key to understanding the way that faith actually works, what faithfulness really is. If we love God, we will keep his commandments. If you don't keep the commandments, then it's clear that you do not love God. You have to keep the commandments if you're going to love God. And does it make any sense to say I have faith in God, but I don't love God? Well, if faith is just agreeing with something, then yeah, people do that all the time. As we see in the scripture, the demons do that. They have that kind of faith. And so even though you can see in scripture, there's multiple ways that the word faith gets used. Sometimes it does mean believe in the sense of I agree with, or I accept that this is true, right? But if you isolate that meaning off and then try to make that apply to everything, then you get all kinds of weird stuff, like I just said. You have to bring all of these meanings together, which, again, it's perfect in English. Faith does all that stuff. To keep faith, to break faith, to have faith, to be faithful. All of those things are together in English and kind of give this full-orbed image of what faith really is. Now, to finish up this brief reflection on what faith is, I want to analogize it, although it's really not even an analogy. It's almost the same thing in some ways, to love, because again, if we love God, we will keep his commandments. If you're going to be faithful to your spouse, that's what loving is about, right? Now, in English, this is where English might fail us a little bit. We tend to talk about love as a feeling, right? That it's something that is occurring somewhere inside us, just as we often sometimes talk about believing as a thought. It's something that occurs somewhere inside, and we talk about having more or less love. It's hard to talk about more or less belief, like I believe in that really hard. It's very difficult to nail down exactly what it means to love someone in that sense, or what it means to believe something in that sense, to think something in that sense, right? Because we have this question like, well, do I really love him? Do I really love her? And I've had people say to me, I don't know whether I really love God. And by that, they usually mean, I don't know whether I feel a feeling way deep down that is supposed to be the real, authentic thing. Okay? So we have to get past this very common use of the word love in English and get to something that's a bit deeper, right? Love in the scriptures, and love actually for a lot of the history of English, is about loyalty, frankly. It's also about self-sacrifice, which is what a loyal person does. So you can claim to love your spouse, but if all you have is a feeling towards your spouse, then really what you have is you desire your spouse. And it's perfectly good to desire your spouse. I mean, that's part of the reason that people get married to begin with, is out of a sense of desire. But if that's all it ever is, and it's like, well, how deeply do I desire this person? That's going to change, my friend. That's going to change based on, frankly, we all age. We don't tend to get better looking as we get older. Maybe some of you do. I'm definitely not. Most people don't. And so desire, often based on the way people look, and so forth, is probably going to go down. But you can love even if you have no desire. You can love someone even if you have no desire for them, because love is about self-sacrifice. Love is about always turning towards the other person and doing what it is that is good for them, especially when it may not be what I want. So that's what love is and how love actually works. And if you say you love God, you keep his commandments. That's what he said. If you say you love your spouse, then that means that you work to help them, that you work to set aside your wants and needs and desires for the other person. That's what love is, that you sacrifice yourself for the good of the other person. And that is what it means to keep faith. That is what it means to be loyal, because you're not loyal. You're not loyal if you leave when things get difficult. You're not loyal if you decide, you know what, this isn't really doing it for me. That's not loyalty. I mean, sometimes there are relationships that need to end because it's not doing it for you, right? Like if you might have a relationship with a local restaurant that, the food gets bad or the cleanliness is terrible and it's not doing it for you, so you're gonna have to end it, and your loyalty to that restaurant is over. That's perfectly understandable. But if we're gonna be loyal to God, well, he never fails us. Now, he sometimes does things that we don't like, but he never fails us, right? So the loyalty is all on us because God is always going to be loyal. He will always be faithful. He's always seeking our salvation. There's never a point when he's not doing that, right? So it's up to us to be loyal. It's up to us to keep the commandments. It's up to us to love him. So that's what faithfulness actually is. That's what it means to have faith, to keep faith, to be faithful, right? Is to do the things that God told us to do. And that's a whole life. It's not just about moral action, right? There's been times I've talked about keeping commandments and I've had people say, oh, it's not just moralism. Oh, yeah, absolutely, it's not just moralism. It's not just about right and wrong. Christianity, sometimes people think Christianity is simply about right and wrong. It is way more than right and wrong, my friends. Way, way more than right and wrong. It is about so much more. It is, number one, about worship of God. That is the very highest priority, the greatest thing that any human being can do, is to worship God, the one who made us, right? But that whole life of faithfulness surrounds that worship, which is our intimacy with God, and not just anything is worship, by the way. I have another video all about this, so check that one out. But worship is our most intimate action that we do with God, but we also do his works, right? So we do what is good. We do what is good. This is beyond just right and wrong, so it's actually constructive and creative. You can do right without doing anything creative. You can, refrain from doing wrong without doing anything creative. But the works of God are creative. The works of God build things. The works of God develop things. The works of God beautify things. The works of God put things in order. All of these things are part of what it means to be faithful to God. This is what our loyalty to him is about. And again, if you have loyalty to your spouse, then these are all things that you're doing at home. These are all things that you're doing as part of your common life together. It's not just about, I never did anything wrong to you, or I did all the right things. No. It is about building something together. That's what it means to keep faith with your spouse, to keep faith with your family, to be loyal, to love. That's what it means to love. And so faith is not this mysterious concept, but it is a little bit complex. It is a little bit complex. And we do ourselves a great disservice if we try to reduce it down to just sort of agreeing with something. It's way more than agreeing. Of course, you have to agree, but you can agree all day long and not do anything about it. You can receive the gift of God all day long and not do anything with it. It is about faithfulness. So that's a good shorthand for understanding what faith is as it's laid out in the New Testament. Next time you're reading the scriptures, next time you're reading the Gospels, next time you're reading the epistles of Paul or wherever else, and you see that word faith, or especially you see the word believe, ask yourself, that's not every single instance, but ask yourself, would the word faithfulness make more sense in this spot? And most of the time, it will. God bless you.